The forest was quiet as dawn broke, the sun's rays barely piercing the dense canopy. Alex stretched, wincing at the ache in his back. Sleeping on the ground was far from comfortable, but it was better than being caught. Shadow lay beside him, its breathing steady but shallow. The wolf's injured leg was still swollen, and Alex knew time was running out. If the infection spread, there'd be no saving Shadow. "You're tougher than you look," Alex muttered, gently patting the wolf's head. Shadow's ears flicked, and its amber eyes opened briefly before closing again. Alex decided to scout for supplies. Leaving Shadow hidden under a pile of leaves and branches, he made his way to a nearby stream. The water was clear and cold, reflecting the vibrant greens of the forest. Alex filled his bottle and splashed his face, trying to shake off the fatigue. As he knelt, a sudden rustling made him freeze. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Slowly, he turned his head, his eyes scanning the forest. A faint sound, footsteps, deliberate and careful, reached his ears. The poachers were close. Heart pounding, Alex hurried back to Shadow. The wolf greeted him with a low growl, sensing his unease. "They're here," Alex whispered, quickly packing their meager supplies. Shadow tried to stand but faltered, its injured leg unable to bear the weight. Alex fashioned a crude harness from vines and a sturdy stick, lifting Shadow onto his back. The wolf was heavy, but adrenaline gave Alex the strength he needed. "Let's go," he muttered, pushing deeper into the forest. The hours dragged on as Alex navigated the unforgiving terrain. The forest seemed to conspire against them, with its twisted roots and thorny underbrush. Shadow remained quiet, its trust in Alex evident in its calm demeanor. By midday, Alex spotted an abandoned hunting cabin. The structure was dilapidated, its wooden walls covered in moss, but it was shelter. Alex pushed open the door, coughing as dust filled the air. He gently set Shadow down on an old blanket he found in the corner. The cabin provided a momentary reprieve, but Alex knew they couldn't stay for long. He scavenged the area, finding a rusty tin of beans and some old bandages. "Not much, but it'll do," he said, glancing at Shadow. The wolf ate cautiously, its strength slowly returning. Alex tended to its wound, cleaning it as best he could with the limited supplies. Shadow flinched but didn't resist, its trust in Alex unwavering. As night fell, the forest came alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. Alex sat by the window, knife in hand, watching for any signs of the poachers. His thoughts drifted to his family, wondering if they were safe, if they missed him. Shadow let out a soft whine, breaking Alex's reverie. The wolf's eyes glowed in the dim light, a silent reassurance. "We'll make it," Alex said softly, more to himself than to Shadow. The night passed without incident, but the morning brought new challenges. As Alex prepared to leave, the sound of barking dogs shattered the silence. The poachers were closing in. "We've got to move," Alex said, lifting Shadow onto his makeshift harness. The wolf let out a low growl, its body tense. They slipped out the back of the cabin, moving as quickly as Alex's legs could carry them. The forest seemed endless, its shadows playing tricks on his eyes. The barking grew louder, the dogs relentless in their pursuit. Suddenly, they reached a rocky ledge overlooking a steep ravine. Alex's heart sank. There was no way forward, and the poachers were closing in behind them. Shadow stepped to the edge, its gaze fixed on the rushing river below. The wolf let out a soft bark, as if urging Alex to follow. "You can't be serious," Alex muttered, shaking his head. The sound of gunfire made the decision for him. Clutching Shadow tightly, Alex leapt off the ledge, the world spinning around them as they fell. They hit the water with a bone-jarring splash, the icy cold stealing Alex's breath. He fought to keep his head above water, holding on to Shadow as the current carried them downstream. When they finally washed ashore, Alex collapsed onto the sand, his chest heaving. Shadow lay beside him, its body trembling but alive. For the first time in days, Alex allowed himself a small smile. "We did it," he whispered, stroking Shadow's fur. "We survived." But he knew the fight wasn't over. The poachers wouldn't stop, and the forest was still a dangerous place. Yet, as Alex looked into Shadow's amber eyes, he felt a renewed sense of determination. They had each other, and that was enough. The forest was cloaked in mist, the cool dampness clinging to Alex's skin as he trudged forward. Shadow limped beside him, the wolf's movements slow but determined. The river had bought them some distance from the poachers, but Alex knew they couldn't afford to rest. The hunters were relentless, and it was only a matter of time before they picked up the trail again. Alex stopped near a fallen tree, kneeling to check Shadow's injured leg. The wolf let out a low whimper, its eyes clouded with pain. "Hang in there," Alex murmured, tearing a strip of cloth from his shirt to reinforce the bandage. "We're almost there." The plan was simple: find higher ground and scout for a safe path out of the forest. But as Alex scanned the dense foliage, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The forest, usually filled with birdsong and rustling leaves, was eerily silent. Suddenly, a sharp bark pierced the air. Alex froze, his heart pounding. The poachers' tracking dogs were close, too close. Grabbing Shadow, he ducked into a thicket, the wolf's body trembling against his chest. The sound of footsteps crunching leaves grew louder, accompanied by muffled voices. "They can't be far," one of the poachers said, his tone cold and calculating. Alex clenched his jaw, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in unfamiliar terrain. But he wasn't about to give up, not now. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the last of his makeshift tools, a handful of small stones and a shard of broken glass. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As the poachers drew closer, Alex hurled a stone into the bushes to his left. The sudden rustle drew their attention, and one of the men barked, "Over there." Using the distraction, Alex slipped deeper into the forest, Shadow limping beside him. The wolf's breathing was labored, each step a struggle, but it refused to stop. By midday, Alex found himself at the base of a steep incline. The rocky terrain was treacherous, but it was their best chance to lose the poachers. "Come on," he urged Shadow, lifting the wolf onto his shoulders. The climb was brutal. Alex's muscles screamed in protest, and sweat dripped down his face as he scrambled up the slope. Behind him, the sound of barking dogs and shouting men spurred him on. At the top, Alex collapsed, his chest heaving. Shadow slid off his shoulders, panting heavily. They were both exhausted, but the view from the ridge gave Alex a glimmer of hope. In the distance, he could see the edge of the forest, a vast meadow bathed in sunlight. "We're close," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But their moment of relief was short-lived. A gunshot echoed through the forest, the sound sharp and deafening. Alex ducked instinctively, his heart racing. The poachers had spotted them. With no time to think, Alex grabbed Shadow and bolted down the other side of the ridge. The descent was even more perilous than the climb, with loose rocks threatening to send them tumbling. The forest seemed to conspire against them, its dense underbrush slowing their progress. Alex's legs burned, and his lungs screamed for air, but he pushed on, fueled by sheer willpower. The meadow was just within reach when a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. It was one of the poachers, his rifle aimed directly at Alex. "End of the line," the man sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger. Before Alex could react, a deep growl rumbled beside him. Shadow, despite its injuries, lunged at the poacher with a ferocity Alex had never seen. The man stumbled back, his weapon clattering to the ground as the wolf's teeth sank into his arm. "Shadow, no!" Alex shouted, grabbing a branch and striking the poacher. The man cried out, falling to the ground as Alex and Shadow darted past him. The meadow was only a few steps away, but the sound of gunfire erupted behind them. Alex felt a searing pain in his shoulder, the force of the bullet knocking him to the ground. Shadow turned, its amber eyes blazing with fury. The wolf charged at the remaining poachers, its movements swift and unrelenting despite its injured leg. Alex struggled to his feet, blood soaking his shirt. "Shadow, we have to go," he shouted, his voice hoarse. The wolf hesitated, its gaze flicking between Alex and the poachers. With a final growl, it retreated, limping back to Alex's side. Together, they stumbled into the meadow, the golden grass swaying in the breeze. The poachers didn't follow, their shouts fading into the distance. Alex collapsed to his knees, clutching his wounded shoulder. Shadow lay beside him, its body trembling with exhaustion. For the first time in days, the oppressive weight of fear lifted, replaced by a fragile sense of relief. "We did it," Alex whispered, his voice trembling. "We're free." The wolf let out a soft whine, nuzzling Alex's hand. Despite the pain and exhaustion, a faint smile crossed Alex's lips. They had survived, together. But as he looked out across the meadow, he couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. The golden meadow stretched out before them, a sea of swaying grass bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Alex leaned against a large boulder, his blood-soaked shirt clinging to his body. Shadow lay beside him, its breathing labored but steady. For a brief moment, the world felt still, as if time itself had paused to grant them a reprieve. But Alex knew better. The poachers wouldn't give up, not after coming so far. The gunshot wound in his shoulder burned with each breath, a stark reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. Shadow stirred, its amber eyes meeting Alex's. Despite its injuries, the wolf's gaze was fierce and unwavering. "We can't stop now," Alex said, his voice hoarse. He pushed himself to his feet, wincing as pain shot through his arm. "There's a village a few miles from here. If we can make it, we'll be safe." The wolf let out a low growl, as if agreeing with him. Alex fashioned a makeshift sling for his arm from his torn shirt and gathered his strength. "Come on, Shadow," he said, helping the wolf to its feet. "Let's finish this." The journey across the meadow was grueling. Each step felt like a marathon, the open expanse offering little protection from prying eyes. Alex scanned the horizon constantly, his nerves on edge. The poachers had lost their trail in the forest, but they weren't far behind. As they neared the edge of the meadow, the faint outline of a dirt road came into view. Alex's heart leaped with hope. Roads meant people, and people meant safety. But before he could celebrate, a distant sound froze him in his tracks, the unmistakable hum of an engine. A black truck appeared on the horizon, its tires kicking up clouds of dust. Alex's blood ran cold. The poachers had found them. "Run," he shouted, pushing Shadow ahead of him. The wolf limped forward, its body trembling with exhaustion. Alex followed, his legs screaming in protest. The truck barreled closer, its headlights cutting through the twilight. Alex spotted a rocky outcrop ahead, a small cluster of boulders that could offer some cover. He veered toward it, urging Shadow to keep moving. They reached the outcrop just as the truck skidded to a halt. 3 men jumped out, their rifles gleaming in the fading light. Alex crouched behind the boulders, his heart pounding. Shadow growled beside him, its body coiled like a spring. "Come out, kid," one of the poachers called, his voice laced with mockery. "You've given us a good chase, but it's over now." Alex gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They were trapped, outnumbered, and outarmed. But he wasn't going to let it end like this, not after everything they'd been through. He spotted a large rock near his feet and picked it up, the weight reassuring in his hand. "Stay here," he whispered to Shadow. The wolf let out a low whine but obeyed, its eyes fixed on Alex. Alex stepped out from behind the boulder, the rock clutched tightly in his hand. The poachers turned toward him, their rifles trained on his chest. "You want me?" Alex said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "Come and get me." The men hesitated, surprised by his boldness. Alex didn't wait for them to recover. He hurled the rock with all his strength, striking one of the poachers square in the face. The man cried out, dropping his rifle as blood streamed from his nose. Shadow seized the moment. The wolf leaped from its hiding spot, a blur of fur and fury. It lunged at the second poacher, its powerful jaws clamping down on his arm. The man screamed, his rifle falling to the ground. The third poacher raised his weapon, his finger on the trigger. Alex didn't think, he just moved. He tackled the man to the ground, the impact jarring his injured shoulder. The rifle skidded out of reach as the two of them grappled in the dirt. The fight was brutal and chaotic. Alex's vision blurred from the pain, but he refused to give up. With a surge of adrenaline, he delivered a sharp blow to the poacher's jaw, knocking him unconscious. Nearby, Shadow wrestled with the second poacher, its growls feral and unrelenting. The man finally broke free, stumbling backward before running toward the truck. "This isn't over," he shouted, helping his injured companion into the vehicle. The engine roared to life, and the truck sped off, disappearing into the distance. Alex collapsed onto the ground, his chest heaving. Shadow limped over to him, its muzzle stained with blood. Alex reached out, resting a trembling hand on the wolf's head. "We did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We won." The sound of distant voices caught his attention. He turned to see a group of villagers approaching, their faces filled with concern. A man stepped forward, his eyes scanning the scene. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice kind. Alex nodded weakly. "We need help," he said, his gaze shifting to Shadow. "He's hurt." The villagers quickly set to work, tending to Alex's wounds and examining Shadow. The wolf growled softly at first but soon relaxed under their gentle hands. As the night fell, Alex sat beside Shadow in the safety of the village. The wolf's injuries were treated, and its breathing had steadied. For the first time in days, Alex felt a sense of peace. "You saved me," he said, scratching behind Shadow's ears. "I don't know how, but you did." The wolf nuzzled his hand, its amber eyes filled with trust. Their bond, forged in the crucible of danger and desperation, was unbreakable. As Alex looked out at the dark forest beyond the village, he knew their journey wasn't just about survival. It was about trust, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of two souls who refused to give up on each other. And together, they had found freedom.
Countless untold tales of bravery and loyalty between humans and animals. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling and heartfelt stories that remind us of the extraordinary power of trust and courage.